Hello viewers, welcome to the next section, adding authentication to an API with Flask. In this section we will learn about adding a user model, adding authentication to resources, creating resource classes to handle users, running migrations to generate the user table, composing requests with the necessary authentication. Now we move on to the video, adding a user model. In this video we will create the model that we will use to represent and persist the user. Also, we will create the Flask Marshmallow schema. Now, open the API models.py file and add a few lines after the declaration of the AddUpdateDelete class. The highlighted block of code shows the new lines that we have recently added. Make sure that you add the import statements. The code file for the sample is included in the RESTful Python section 06 folder. The code declares the user model, specifically subclasses of both the db.Model and the AddUpdateDelete classes. We specified the field types, maximum lengths and defaults for the three attribute ID, that is, name, hashed password and creation date. These attributes represent fields without any relationship and therefore they are instances of the db.Column class. The model declares an ID attribute and specifies the true value for the primary key argument to indicate it is the primary key. SQL Alchemy will use the data to generate the necessary table in the PostgreSQL database. The user class declared some methods, which we will see now. The first method is verifyPassword. This method calls the verify method for the parslib.apps.custom.app.context instance imported as password context with the received password and the stored hashed password for the user self.hashedPassword as the arguments. The verify method hashes the received password and returns true only if the hashed received password matches the stored hashed password. We never restore the saved password to its original state. We just compare hashed values. The next method is check password strength and hash if OK. This method uses the module that provides regular expression matching operations to check whether the password received as an argument fulfills many qualitative requirements. The code requires the password to be longer than 8 characters with a maximum of 32 characters. The password must include at least one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, one number and one symbol. The code checks the results of many calls to the read.search method to determine whether the received password fulfills each requirement. In case any of the requirements isn't fulfilled, the code returns a tuple with an error message and false. Otherwise, the code calls the encrypt method for the parslib.apps.custom.app.context instance imported as password context, with the received password as an argument. The encrypt method chooses a reasonably strong scheme based on the platform, with the default settings for the round selection, and the code saves the hashed password in the hashed password attribute. Finally, the code returns a tuple with an empty string and true, indicating that the password fulfilled the qualitative requirements and it was hashed. The model declares a constructor, that is, the init method. This constructor receives the username in the name argument and saves it in an attribute with the same name. Since we have made all the changes, we will save the file now. Now we will create the Flask Marshmallow schema that we will use to validate, serialize and deserialize the previously declared user model. Open the API models.py file and add the class user schema block of code after the existing lines. The code declares the user schema class, specifically a subclass of the ma.schema class. The user schema class declares the name attribute as an instance of fields.string. The required argument is set to true to specify that the field cannot be an empty string. The validate argument is set to validate.length3 to specify that the field must have a minimum length of 3 characters. The validation for the password isn't included in the schema. We will use the check password strength and hash if OK method defined in the user class to validate the password. Now, save the file to keep the changes. In this video, we have added a user model.